Thank you guys for joining us today. We have Leslie Brilliant, our graduate school recruiter, as our moderator, and our panelists are Dr. Corey Sparks from the Department of Applied Demography, Dr. Hunda Wan from the Department of Mechanical Engineering, Dr. Ileana Alanis from the Department of Interdisciplinary Learning and Teaching, and we also have Dr. Tracy Boss from the graduate school. So she's actually the assistant dean and graduate of postdoctoral training and success. So at this moment, I think everybody should be in. I know there's people trickling in, but we're gonna go ahead and get started with Leslie.
Well, like Maria said, thank you everybody joining us today, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us and assisting our current and prospective doctoral students. So I'm going to start off with some couple questions. So tell us a little bit about your experience. When did you decide to apply for a doctoral program, and how do you prepare for something like that? So I think we'll start it off with Dr. Sparks, if we don't mind.
Sure. So I knew I wanted to do a doctorate after maybe my first year of master's degree training in my field, which was originally anthropology. If you wanted to go in the academy, you had to have a PhD. And so I applied to several different places. I basically talked to the people who were my undergraduate and graduate at my master's level advisors and the faculty that I really had connected with, and talk to them about programs that they thought would be well suited for me. And so I kind of did a round of interviews with people that were people that I respected, and they told me the programs I should apply for. That's sort of how I went about doing it. Is there more questions than that, or?
No, we'll go to the next
Okay.
one after everybody goes around. So Dr. Wang?
Yes, hi. I'm glad to talk about my experience here. So when did I started thinking about applying for a PhD program? I actually went into industry after I got my master's degree for a few years. So I started in Army, which it's a responsibility for all our people in our country. And then I went to bicycle industry for a few years, and then I thought that before I got too old, maybe I should try something different. So I went back into academia, went to my PhD program, and so that was a very good decision for my life. And so why did I decided to go to PhD? Because first of all, I love learning, and you see a lot of advanced knowledge there. And so when I was in industry, I think that this industry work is great, but somewhat repetitive and kind of limited to the knowledge part. So I decided to go forward to advanced study. And what else? How did I prepare? So like Dr. Sparks said, I also talked to people, and I did quite some study by reading websites and going over a lot of material. So that was what I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Alanis?
Hello, and thank you so much for hosting this session. I reflected on these questions. This was, many years ago. I was working on my master's degree in bilingual education at UT Pan American, which is in the Rio Grande Valley, and it's now UT RGV. And I was also a certified teacher in a second grade classroom. So I would teach during the day, and then I would attend class in the evening. And what happened was that a junior Latino professor who had just recently completed his PhD from A&M University really started talking to those of us in the master's program, encouraging us to apply, letting us know that there was funding available, and just really telling us, don't hesitate, you need to apply. And that's really all it took, a little encouragement from someone who was similar to me, both geographically and an ethnic background, right? He was also from the Rio Grande Valley. And I just decided to take that chance. And how did I prepare? Well, I certainly talked to a lot of professors there at UT Pan American, and I read research in the area in which I was interested in working, so that when I applied, I already had an idea of this is an area of study that I'd like to pursue. I did receive funding, and I was accepted into the program at UT Austin. And so certainly the funding was a crucial piece for me, but not, I mean, I would have gone regardless of whether I had received that funding or not.
Thank you. And Dr. Boss.
So my experience, I think, was a little bit different, and it's a little bit funny because now I'm teaching graduate students and postdocs how to figure out what they want to do with their next stage of their career. But when I was an undergraduate, I was studying chemistry, and I did a lot of lab work for different people for independent research. And I just never even thought about going to graduate school. I worked with graduate students, I worked with postdocs, but for some reason, I just never thought that that was for me. So after I graduated with my bachelor's in chemistry, I worked in a laboratory as a lab technician. And I enjoyed it a lot. I got to learn a lot of different techniques. But again, I worked with a lot of different graduate students, a lot of different postdocs. And one day when I was setting up experiments for graduate students, I thought, why am I setting up these experiments for them? It'd be more interesting to set these experiments up for me. So that's when I decided that, hey, if they can do it, maybe I would want to do it. So I started talking to the folks that I worked with. And I decided that that's what I was going to do. And fortunately, something that was very interesting is my decision, of course, I'm like, I want to go to the West Coast. I want to see the graduate schools out there. So I started doing my research for which schools would have interesting chemistry departments. And more so, I was interested in chemistry that was involved in biological processes. So there were very few departments that were bioorganic chemistry programs. So that's how I narrowed it down. And as soon as I started looking, one of the graduate students that I worked with, they said, you need to look into fellowships. So at that time, I also applied for a biotechnology fellowship at these universities. And so the funding came and I found the department I liked. But basically the graduate students I worked with were telling me what to do.
Excellent, thank you. So for those of you that attended your master's before going on to your PhD, did you see any difference between what you went through to get into your master's degree versus what it took to get into your doctoral program? And so I guess we'll give it up to whoever wants to start us off.
I will. That was my experience. I finished my undergrad a semester early and applied as a non-degree seeking student to the master's degree program that I was wanting. It was in my home. It was I did my bachelor's at University of Tennessee, and I applied as a non-degree seeking master's student to get a semester worth of coursework in before I filed my official application to the master's degree program there. And the master's degree program there, and I think a lot of master's degree programs across the country are very, they want a lot of people in the master's degree programs. And compared to the PhD application, the master's program application was much less rigorous in terms of the types of things I had to have, but also in terms of the competition to get into the programs. I think my master's cohort might have had 30 people in it, but my PhD cohort, which I went to Penn State for my PhD, and at that time it was the #1 program in the country, and my cohort there was 3 people. And I was the only one that had a master's degree, and that's just not how they usually did things. So it was a much more rigorous process. I did a lot more interviews with the faculty there. I went to visit, paid my way to go visit there, talk to students, talk to faculty, because at the PhD, I think it was much more about fit. If that term that people throw around is like, do I want to spend the next 6 years of my life here studying with these people? Do I get along with them? Do I get along with the students? Do I like the physical setting, as Tracy was saying? All those things. It was a much more laborious and rigorous process applying to PhD than it was for me for the master's programs.
I'll just add, I think, well, first of all, in education, I think we should understand that working on a master's degree in education is really different from the PhD, because in the master's program, we are really serving to increase teachers' efficacy, right? So increasing your pedagogical skills and understanding how to work with children and families, or students and families. The PhD is designed to increase your inquiry skills and your theoretical knowledge base, particularly if you're wanting to work in academia. And so certainly when we look at the difference, or we look at the application process and we think of the differences, certainly the acceptance rate is smaller. There are limited slots for acceptance. But I think that the biggest difference for me in the application process and what I see today when students are applying to the program is the development of a personal statement. I think that's a skill that many times students haven't quite developed. Many times students are applying, they're fairly young in their career, and perhaps that's something that the graduate school could certainly, having more sessions such as these for students at the MA level, that will help them develop that personal statement when they're applying to the doctoral program. Because I do think, as I read applications of students today and I reflect on my experience, that was the hardest part of the process, was how do I really frame my personal statement in a coherent, succinct fashion that makes me an attractive candidate.
I would like to add on to that a little bit. My experience is probably different from all of you in this room. I grew up in Taiwan. In East Asia, it's a little different. For a master's degree, we actually had to take an entrance exam. So everything is based on the entrance exam. And some programs would have an interview after entrance exam. So it's purely based on your scores. And so when I was applying for PhD, I didn't have the right mindset, so to speak. So I was thinking that if I have great GPA, that would be it. But it turned out that I got accepted by a few programs, but also rejected by a few programs. And after I become faculty member, I realized that, well, applying for PhD, you need to show more than just GPA. Especially in engineering, I think experience shows a lot, and also your independence on conducting research. That's the most important thing we're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can probably follow on that, where I did not do a master's. When I applied to the PhD program, you go through, at least for chemistry, and you get your master's along the way, and you are funded in that manner. But the idea of, yes, GREs are no longer being looked at right now, but yes, GREs, you do, if that comes back, you'd have to worry about that. But I think once you get your foot in the door, it's very important. You are going to have interviews or even your personal statement. And if it's one piece of advice I could give you that you have to remember is when you're going to do your personal statement or go for the interview, it's not all about what you want. It's what can you provide to that program, or more specifically, the advisor you're going to work for. What type of projects are out there where you really want to work on that project and you have an idea of what piece you want to bring to the table. So not only, it's enjoyable for you, but how would your skills benefit the person that you would be studying with?
Thank you. And so you all kind of touched into our next question, which is, what do you think is the most important component of a graduate application and why? So you all kind of touched a little bit, if there's something that you want to go a little bit deeper in, especially for those of you that have actually been on an admissions committee.
So I think, as other people have already alluded to, the personal statement is really something that makes you stand out. Transcripts, certainly coming out of undergraduate programs, will look very, very, very similar to one another across programs. Letters of recommendation are really important, and it's really important, I think, for the people that write you letters to know you. I read a lot of very, very vague letters from from professors that might have had the student in one class. They didn't develop a relationship with them. And so to that point, it's hard for someone who's had you in one class to really speak in great depth about who you are. So I think having people write you letters that you've tried to develop a relationship with, and that's people that young people that I talk to now, but that are going into college, I stress, you have to develop relationships with your professors. Try to get an advisor in your department that you can talk to about things. Those relationships are so important. The statement of purpose, though, that's one thing that I try to talk to everybody who applies to our PhD program, and that's the one thing that I really stress. And I've got a very good formula, three things that I want people to look at, and why us, why UTSA, what are you interested in terms of your research, and look and see who we are. Look at our faculty. Who do you see yourself working with? If those three things aren't in a letter, you know, that's something that we really value in our program, is people that have done some work, some background work on thinking about what they want to do, and if we are the right program to do that with.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of picking advisors that you would like to work for, and when you're doing your personal statements, not just mentioning the names, because that's pretty easy. You scroll through the computer and see who they are, but what are maybe the projects they're working on. So say if you're going to an invitation for me, I'd really like to work for Dr. Boss. I think her bioorganic chemistry projects are fascinating. I preferentially like her work with proteins. And it's as simple as that, but at least it shows that you've done the homework of who do you want to work for, what school do you want to join.
Right, so I will reiterate a lot of this. I am the graduate advisor of record for the PhD program in our department. That means I do oversee the application and the acceptance process. And so I think there are actually two components that can increase students' likelihood of acceptance. One is the references, as Dr. Sparks mentioned. So often students don't know who to ask, or when they ask someone, they don't provide the reference with enough information to write a solid recommendation. And so the advice is, if you ask someone for a recommendation, well, first you do need to ask them if they are willing, but you need to provide them with a resume, or in our case, a vita, so that they can really include your experiences in their reference, and so they can tailor their recommendation to the program. You also want to ask someone who knows the caliber of your work versus just somebody who knows your personal qualities. So that would be a supervisor, a former professor, a colleague, but somebody that can speak to your work ethic and the quality of that work. And then the second piece is, I'll go back to that personal statement. The statement is the main tool that faculty use to determine who you are and why you are a good fit for the program. So you want to research the faculty in the program so that when you write your statement, you can make specific references to their work and why you want to work with them. And then research the program itself, right? So that you can connect your experiences with the program's goals and objectives. And so what that tells the committee then is that you are a serious candidate, you have done the research, you have done the work, and you have thought seriously through this and would like to be a member of that intellectual community.
And let me add on to all these a little more. I think everyone touched on very important points: the statement, the reference letters. In our department, we actually encourage the applicants to reach out to faculty members and to know each other a little more and show who you are and how you can be an asset to the department. So, don't be shy to come on campus to talk to faculty members. Well, probably not now because we're not on campus, but feel free to reach out through email and try to make connections with the faculty members, and you might be surprised. There might be opportunities waiting for you with funding.
I think that's actually a very significant point, Dr. Wan, that you want to understand who the faculty are, but you also want them to know who you are. And so that is a good way of making that personal connection. And faculty will give you their ideas of what makes a strong personal statement, or who you should ask as a reference, or why they, you can have the conversation about why you are a good fit for that particular program.
I would encourage you to talk to the graduate advisor of record for the program you're talking to. I mean, I have multiple calls every week with people that are interested in the program, and I have that one-on-one connection with them and talk through what they're interested in. And that's a really essential part about getting into a PhD program, is sort of establishing that connection and talking to somebody who knows about the program and all the funding stuff and all the admission stuff, and just, being known to them helps.
Thank you. So our next question is going to be, and I want to start with Dr. Boss. what advice would you give a student that may be going into a doctoral program that doesn't have their master's degree? They're going directly from their bachelor's degree to their doctoral program.
I would say, and maybe the broad thing is that you should start thinking about this, say you're earlier than your senior year, so it's hard to give advice if people are already advanced, but the idea of what are you doing besides sitting in classes and taking exams and turning in your homework. You have to show that you are excited about whatever scholarly work or research you want to get into by the other things that you did. I mentioned that I did independent research, so that's something in addition to what I needed to graduate. So the idea that you show to the people that would want to bring you in that you are already excited about this area and that you're already participating. So somehow you have to show that you're going above and beyond just sitting in classes, taking exams, getting good grades, because everybody going into a doctoral program is doing those things. So you have to set yourself apart by what other things are you participating in.
Would anybody else like to add any words of wisdom?
I think oftentimes students shy away from applying to the doctoral program because they worry, you know, can I do it? Do I have the, you know, the fortitude to be able to withstand the 3 to 4 years in a doctoral program, or sometimes 6 years? And I think that we shouldn't put our own personal barriers in front of us, right? We should apply to the program, put your best foot forward, and let them make the decision whether you're a good fit or not. And then sometimes it doesn't mean, if you didn't get accepted, it means you weren't a good fit that year, right? So that's where we say, go back and talk to the faculty in your area and talk to them about what they're looking for, what they need, because maybe the following year, we have a new faculty member and that just got hired, and you're a perfect fit for that faculty member. So you don't want to dissuade yourself from initially applying, and then even if you didn't get accepted the first round, because it is competitive, then you need to think about applying a second or even third time.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to my final question before we open it up for students. For those of you that are still with us, we are going to be using the Q&A section of Zoom. If you want to add any of your questions in there, I'll be reading them out loud for our panelists. If there's somebody specific that you would like to answer a question, make sure that you reference them in your question. So do any of my panelists have any final advice that you would want to give students for considering doctoral programs, especially if you, like Dr. Alanis, Dr. Juan, and Dr. Sparks, are specifically representing our specific programs?
I think I'd like to reiterate the idea of don't think that you can't do it. You may as well fill out the application. You can't win if you don't play. And the idea, I know when I applied to different graduate schools, I applied to some, you know, very difficult graduate schools that I didn't get in just to see what it would be like. So I would say go ahead if you want to go into and get your doctorate or get your master's, go for some of the heavy hitters and really apply to the ones that you want to attempt. Don't limit yourself.
I also think we say now is not a good time. It may never be a good time. So, you know, it's just take that leap and go forward with it.
I think one big thing that I talk to a lot of people about is there's a lot of misconceptions and sort of the dogma surrounding applying to graduate school. And my job, I tell people, is to dissuade that sort of wrong information. A lot of people I talk to are working professionals and they want to do a PhD and they don't think that they can do it part-time. And that's absolutely not true. They don't think that people with families can do it. That's absolutely not true. We have 60% of our students in our PhD program are part-time. They have families, they work full-time. It's absolutely possible. And if someone comes to you and says it's impossible that someone can do it part-time and be successful, they're wrong. I would really encourage you to talk to the people in the programs that you want to apply to. You know, that's a huge barrier, I think, is not communicating with the people in the programs that you want to work with. There's a lot of great people out there, and they want to get people into their programs, and they're waiting for people to email them almost, and want information about coming to work at UTSA. So I would reach out. That's the thing that I didn't do when I was applying the first round to master's degree programs. I didn't reach out to anybody. The second round, when I was applying for PhDs, I reached out and made those one-on-one connections. And to me, that's the biggest valuable thing that people are never told, is to reach out and talk.
On my side, I think I have two things to share. The first thing is to understand what it takes. The second thing is to find your passion. So in terms of what it takes, I think the other professors already touched on that. So you have to know PhD program is a pretty big investment. So you have to talk to people and understand what it really takes. It's not just reading books, taking exams, but it's actually a different lifestyle for several years. Yeah, so understand that part and make sure that it's what you want. And then find your passion. For each program, there are a lot of different fields in there. And so you have to find something that you really like and can hold on to it for several years. And this may determine your future career. So find your passion is really important. Don't just go for PhD for the sake of, maybe a good name, like PhD doctor, somebody. No, but it's about what you really want to do. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to some general questions. So the first one that I will read out to y'all, it says, could you go more into what a fellowship is and how would you apply to one?
We do offer fellowships in the College of Education, and I'm particularly in the Department of Interdisciplinary Learning and Teaching. Fellowships, though, are for students who are enrolled full-time, and they cannot seek employment elsewhere, which is a negative caveat that we have. However, the fellowship does pay all of tuition and fees, and then the student works as a graduate research assistant, and so they receive a stipend for that work. And aside from what the department offers, certainly there is funding available that students can apply with, whether it's federal, state, or even local funding that people have set up as part of their mission, right, to continue educating the students of San Antonio.
You know, a lot of places you can apply, usually as Dr. Alanis just said, when you do your application, you say, I want to be considered for funding that's available. That can be a teaching assistantship, that can be a research assistantship. It can be 20 hours a week, it could be 10 hours a week. There's a lot of variation in terms of what types of funding are available. National Science Foundation has a great graduate research fellowship program for those who are more in the science and STEM fields. National Institutes of Health has a really good pre-doctoral award for people that are in health-related fields. Again, I think by connecting with your graduate advisor early and talking to other students in the program, you can kind of see what the funding options are like. But I mean, there are assistantships that are sort of funded by departments in the university, and there are fellowships that are also external. Lots of agencies, private funding. There's a lot of different places you can apply for graduate fellowships, and the graduate school is always a good place to point people towards resources on that.
And I would just add the fellowship is a separate application process, so you can be accepted to the program and not receive a fellowship. So it is two different processes, but certainly there are fellowships available in our case for full-time students.
Yeah, because I had mentioned my case, again, a science-based thing. It was an NIH fellowship, and I found the fellowship on the departmental website. and I guess I shouldn't say website because we didn't have a website at the time. I think I contacted somebody and they sent me a pamphlet. But the reason I knew that it existed is that, as I mentioned, I was working with a graduate student who had a biotechnology fellowship. So even better, I asked that person, could you share what your fellowship application looked like? And they said, even better, you take a look at this. Why don't you write what you think you should fill in for yourself, and I'll take a look when you're finished. So I think that was something that was crucial, that I got to see what a mock one looked like, and I could model mine after what had been successful. So find people who are willing to help, and don't be afraid to ask, because I think many people are willing to help you. I find that to be true, that people are afraid to ask, but you should always ask.
In engineering, I think the more common one is actually research assistantship. And of course, we also have fellowship, teaching assistantship, and a few other, all different things. But I would say most of the engineering PhD students are on some sort of graduate research assistantship, and which means that you have responsibility for specific research projects. And so in terms of how to find these opportunities, I think the best way is to reach out to faculty members in the area of your interest. And typically these faculty members will appoint their graduate research assistants directly. They don't need to go through the department for advertisement or anything like that. So if you build up personal connection with the faculty members, the chance of you getting funded for your PhD program is a lot higher.
How much does it matter if I obtain my undergraduate degree and my PhD from the same institution?
I think it depends on what you want to do. I think when I was applying to schools, it was a strict no-no. You didn't get your graduate degrees from the same place you got your undergraduate degrees. But that's, I think, one of those things I mentioned earlier, these sort of tales that are told in academia to scare people away. I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to go in academia, I think it's the best thing is to get as many different ideas from as many different places as possible. That's not always an option for people. I think it's best to talk to the people that you work with and say, look, if I stayed here for my master's and my PhD, is that going to be a problem? Well, but will people, poo-poo my applications when I go to apply for academic jobs? That's usually what you're going to be facing. If you try to go to the academy, some people will automatically sort of push people off that didn't go to the top university or something like that, which is total nonsense. Industry, I think, is less important. I think if you go to industry or applied work, they want people that have the best skills they can get to fill the best positions. That's my opinion on it. But there's a lot of that sort of nonsense talk out there that you're doomed if you do that. I don't think it's true.
I think it's less of an issue if your undergrad and your PhD are from the same institution. It can be more of an issue, like Dr. Sparks mentioned, when your master's degree and your PhD is from the same institution. It's not always going to have a negative impact or effects when people are looking at your resume and vita, but it's definitely something for you to consider as far as, what are my options when I'm looking at my PhD program.
Yeah, I mentioned I was looking towards the West Coast, and it was specifically, and again, I don't know if this is right or wrong, one of the labs I was working in, I told my boss, I said, I think I'm going to stay at the University of Wisconsin to do chemistry. And she said, no, you have to look east or you have to look west. And so that was her impression, but that's how I got to the West Coast.
And I think it's always good to go see the world, right? I come from East Asia, and I'm here in America, and the life is very different, and I learned a lot. But in terms of, is it really bad to get all degrees from the same school? There's no standard answer for that. I've seen even faculty members graduated from, with different degrees from the same universities, and they got an academic job. So not really a problem, but if you get a chance to go out and see the world, why not, right?
So the next question, it says, I've been in the professional world since receiving my master's degree in 1996. Is this a barrier?
In education, it's actually a plus because we do want people who are coming into the PhD program that have that real world practical experience, in our case of working with students, working with families, and working with communities. So that would actually be a huge plus for us.
I love to see people that come in with that outside knowledge. And a lot of our people, as I said before, are part-time, that work, they work a real job during the day, and they have a, it depends. If you're wanting to change fields, I think people might be skeptical of someone who gets a undergraduate degree or master's degree in like English and wants to do a biochemistry PhD. That might look kind of strange to some review committees, but I really like people that have a lot of practical experience, because that's one thing that's oftentimes missing in the academy is practical knowledge. I love it when people have outside experience. Don't let that get in your way. No.
In engineering, I think experience is important if you're in that same area you're pursuing, but it might be a little bit of a barrier if you stay away from school for too long, because back into the program, you'll still need to take advanced calculus and all these math courses that you probably have not used any of those for a decade or so. Yeah, so you might need to think about brushing up a little bit before applying, and show your capability through the GRE score or something you can demonstrate your capability.
And I was going to say, it's not the same thing because I was a lab technician for 2 years. So it's not a long stretch, but I was using my hands, but I did not do any exams or big reading things. So, but then if you become serious, you're like, I'm going to do this. It's like riding a bicycle. You can figure out how to be a student again. And really the person that's going to be your advisor or your department, you're just going to have to find the right match, because there are going to be some people that are going to say, no, I don't want somebody that's been away from school for that long. But then for other people, it's not going to matter. If they're looking for a smart individual, maybe you are that smart individual because you show how mature you are and how committed you are to going back to school. So you just have to find the right person to match with.
So next question. And I applaud the student for asking this question. It's, how do you find your passion? I like a lot of different things and I don't know what I want to research. I'm also afraid of reaching out to faculty. I'm afraid of bothering them as a stranger.
Well, first about bothering faculty. We do receive a lot of emails. So if you email us and we don't respond, it's okay to email us a second time. I think talking to the graduate advisor of record first, that is our function, as we call ourselves the GARs. That is our function, is to answer your questions and direct you to certain faculty that we think would be beneficial, and you talking with and getting to know. So going that route is definitely something to consider. And as far as your passion, my first degree, I have a BBA in finance, and I worked in banking, and it wasn't a good fit for me. And so when I went into education, that's where I definitely found my niche, and where I felt this is easy, it's comfortable, right? I like it, I enjoy it. And so even though I actually resisted going into education, which is why I went into finance, but it is hard for new students coming into the PhD program to find, an area of research. But that's also what the program is designed to do, is to help you start really broad with, this is the area that I'm interested in, and then start narrowing that down to something that's feasible, that you can complete, in 1 to 2 years with a dissertation.
I couldn't agree more. It's the graduate advisor is sort of the face to the graduate program. Contact them first. If you're nervous about contacting specific faculty, they know everybody in their department. They know what they work on. They know who's taking students, who's not, who has funding. All these are, that's our role, is to sort of welcome people into the department. I think every graduate advisor I know will say the same thing. I really think in terms of finding your passion, you got to read outside your textbook. Okay, textbooks are great, but reading outside your textbook, go, find your journals in your field, in the fields you're taking. Like if you're an upper level undergraduate, go find journals in your field and start looking at research that people are writing currently. If you have opportunities to do independent studies with faculty, that is what absolutely made me find what I wanted to do, was working with a faculty member for like 2 semesters in a row, doing an independent study where I was working in their lab, and it was just really fantastic. And I did that with a couple of different people because I love 2 things, and I ended up choosing one and going down that path. And if I hadn't have done that, I would never have had this sort of practical taste of what the work was going to be like. Talk to grad students, talk to other graduate students that are in the programs, because they know who the faculty are and they know what they're like. And a lot of programs, like Dr. Eleni said, the first year they teach you a lot of the basics, and while you're doing the basics of that program, you learn an absolute ton of stuff and methods, theory, things like that. And then it's easier to say what you want to do after that first year.
The other thing I would say is when you say, oh, you like a lot of different things, it's like, well, good for you. That's awesome. And I can speak from experience. I studied chemistry. After that, I went to a virus lab and I worked on viruses. Then I went to a publishing house, Nature Publishing Group, and I was an editor and I did writing. And then I came back to academia to work with graduate students in education. So people would say, what are you doing? And it's just, there are so many things that are interesting, and don't stop yourself. If you find an interesting project or something that you do want to help move forward, go for it. And then I'm going to do a plug. So sorry, Maria, or maybe this is good, that I do a recorded session called the Informational Interview, and I'll put a link in our chat. But this would help you if you're nervous about contacting people to talk and to just gather information. This video will really help you on learning how to reach out to folks you'd like to talk to and now how to have those conversations.
I would like to just echo on those a little more. If you're afraid of talking to faculty members, reach out to the graduate students, like Dr. Sparks say. And so each faculty member usually have maybe a lab or a group of graduate students working with them. And so go talk to them, see what the research is really like, and if there's a chance, volunteer for being a lab member to join their lab meetings and so on. So you get to know a little more insider information. And in terms of talking to faculty members, I can share my experience. I was quite shy when I was an undergrad student. Living in Taiwan, a whole different culture. We were not used to talk to faculty members at all. And after becoming a faculty member here, I kind of long for talking to students. I want students to reach out to me, and we can discuss a lot of, things about the program and things like that. So just, faculty members are not that scary. We're friendly people, and we're here waiting for talking to you.
The next question I have, and I know we're running out of time, so I apologize to those of you. I can't get to all of y'all today. How long should it typically take a student to complete a PhD, and what advice would you give students in relation to time management, especially for those who are balancing taking courses full-time, teaching, and doing research?
Well, in the College of Education, particularly in teacher education, it takes anywhere from, it could be 4 to 6 years. It does depend if you're coming part-time or full-time. For students who are coming full-time, they typically take 2 courses a semester, but you may realize that you can only take 1 course a semester because it is a lot, right? If you're working full-time, you have a family, you're having to do the readings, write the papers, do the research. So you also have to know what your limits are and what you can do so that you do it well. And I think time management is certainly a skill that many faculty haven't mastered themselves. So I do think that you just have to know what you can do, what you're capable of, what works for you and your family, and and work through that.
Absolutely. Time management is, it's one of the things that at our orientation sessions we follow, like, organization in terms of being able to compartmentalize the part of your life that you're devoting to your studies. And then within that, have your courses organized and your research stuff organized, thinking about like your files on your computer, try not to have it so that you have 1,000 icons on your desktop. You have folders for things so that you can organize your life, because as you're going through that, you're going to want to look back on things that you did the year before. It's very different from undergrad, where everything is a course by course basis. Graduate school for me is like cumulative. So you're constantly going back and looking at things that you've done before, because you're learning a lot of stuff and it's all building on each other. But that's always one of the things I tell people is absolutely organize your time, devote mornings, a couple mornings a week to just working on your research, for instance. But I always view it like a computer.
Yeah, and the idea of people being graduate students, I sometimes wish we could get rid of the student part, because it is kind of your job now to be whatever that research person is, or the scholar. And some days your days are going to be really long, and some days you're going to be waiting for something to finish. And so I'm going to step forward and say the work-life balance. Some days it's going to be completely chaotic, and the balance will come later. So the balance will be cyclic, chaotic. Just take it whenever you can.
Some days you're going to be productive, some days aren't. That happens to everybody. Don't feel bad if you have an unproductive day.
But isn't that life in general?
Absolutely.
Some days it takes all day to fail.
I would like to touch on the original question. So how long typically does it take? In engineering, I think it typically is about 4 or 5 years if you put in your time. Yeah, so just like everybody else said. In terms of time management, I actually know that the graduate school has some workshops and recorded on, the video you can watch with time management, survival guide for PhD students, and several other things. We have very useful resources.
So I know we only have about 4 more minutes. So I'm going to open it up for any closing statements that you guys would like to make, and before we say goodbye.
Talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Always reach out. If you want to go somewhere and you want to do something, reach out. Talk to your professors where you're currently at. The more you know, the better. But never let somebody tell you can't do something.
I know we didn't get to a lot of the questions, so again, we just reiterate that for you to reach out to the graduate advisor of record in the program of which you are interested in, because almost all of those questions that I see there can be answered by that graduate advisor of record.
And another side is get yourself ready before you get in. It's going to be a shock if you've been out of schools for a few semesters. Yeah, there will be some challenges ahead, but once you get pass through all these challenges, there's a lot of fruitful enjoyment after that.
Yeah, I would say good luck, and don't sell yourself short. Get out there and go after what you really want.
If you have any further questions, if we didn't get to your question today, feel free to send us an email. It's going to be graduate.admissions@utsa.edu. I'd like to thank our lovely panelists for all of your knowledge and for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.